Sign the transfer request or I tell Derek's people exactly where you live. My mother didn't say hello. She didn't say she was sorry about my father. She didn't even wait for me to fully step through the door before she slid the form across the kitchen counter like she was serving a subpoena. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at her. She was standing with her arms crossed, wearing the expression she reserved for negotiations she believed she had already won. My stepfather was leaning against the refrigerator, pretending to scroll through his phone. He wasn't scrolling. He was watching. Before I tell you what I did with that pen, drop a comment and tell me the most entitled thing a family member has ever asked you for. I read every single one. I set my bag down slowly. I didn't reach for the pen. In my line of work, you never sign anything in the first 30 seconds. You read. You breathe. You find the thing they don't want you to find. The transfer request was for $400,000. My father had been dead for 11 days. I want to tell you who I was in that kitchen, standing across from a woman who carried me for 9 months and apparently spent the following 31 years calculating my net worth. I'm a medical billing auditor. I work for a regional hospital group reviewing claims, catching fraud, tracing money that shouldn't have moved, and finding out exactly where it went instead. I have a very particular relationship with documents. I know what a legitimate one looks like. I know what a coerced one looks like. And I know what it looks like when someone is handing you a pen before you've had a chance to read the fine print. The $400,000 was my father's life insurance policy. He'd taken it out when I was 7 years old and named me the sole beneficiary. I know this because I found the original policy folded inside a birthday card he mailed me the year I turned 25. There was a note in his handwriting that said, "This is yours, no matter what anyone tells you." I didn't understand it then. I understood it now. My mother had been divorced from my father since I was 9. She had remarried my stepfather 2 years later. They had my half-brother Derek together. Derek was 26 and currently owed money to people who didn't accept payment plans. "Tell Derek's people where I live," I repeated. My voice came out flatter than I intended, like a line item on a spreadsheet. She blinked. "He has a problem, Maya. You know that. These men, they don't play. They came to the house last week. They sat outside for 4 hours. 4 hours. My stepfather finally looked up from his phone. His jaw was tight. He thought this was going well. "Derek's problem isn't mine," I said. "It is now," my mother said. "Your father left you that money out of guilt. You know that. He was never there for this family. He owed us. He owed Derek. And now you're sitting on $400,000 while your brother is in danger." There it was, the reframe. In my mother's version of history, my father's absence was a debt. My inheritance was repayment on that debt, and I was simply the holding account. I looked at the transfer form again. It was made out to a company called Delray Horizon Solutions LLC. I didn't recognize the name. I pulled out my phone and typed it in, while my mother kept talking about loyalty and family and the way things worked in this house. Delray Horizon Solutions LLC was registered 8 weeks ago in the state of Florida. The registered agent was my stepfather's brother. I put my phone down. "How much does Derek owe?" I asked. $90,000, my mother said quickly. Too quickly. She'd been rehearsing this number. The form was for $400,000. I picked up the pen. My mother's shoulders dropped half an inch with relief. My stepfather straightened up, and I did what I always do when I need to buy time without looking like I'm buying time. I started asking process questions. "What's the timeline on this transfer?" I asked, clicking the pen open. "I want to make sure the bank doesn't flag it." My stepfather stepped forward. "What do you mean flag it?" "Insurance payouts over $250,000 trigger an automatic review at most regional banks," I said, which was partially true. "It triggers an enhanced due diligence checklist. If I wire this to an LLC that was incorporated less than 90 days ago, the compliance team is going to put a hold on it. Could be 2 weeks. Could be 6. My mother stared at me. "Derek doesn't have 2 weeks." "I know," I said. "That's why we need to do this right." I set the pen down. "I have a contact in the insurance claim processing department. Let me call her. If we route this through a policyholder disbursement reclassification, it processes as a personal transfer, not a business transaction. Bypasses the LLC flag entirely." It was a sentence designed to sound exactly like something a person who audits medical billing claims would say. Most of it was invented. The part about the LLC flag had some truth in it, enough to make the whole thing land. My stepfather looked at my mother. My mother looked at the phone in my hand. She wanted to say no. She wanted to grab the pen back and demand I sign it right then. But I'd introduced a variable she didn't understand, and greedy people are only brave when they think they're in control. "Fine," she said. "Make the call." I stepped out of the kitchen into the hallway. I didn't call my contact at the insurance company. I called my attorney. I had hired him 3 weeks ago, 2 days after my father's funeral, when I came home and found 3 voicemails from my mother on my personal cell, my work cell, and somehow my direct office line. The voicemails were friendly at first, then less friendly. The third one mentioned Derek's situation, and used the phrase, "I know you'll do the right thing," in a tone that made it clear she had a very specific definition of right. I had already run a preliminary background check on Delray Horizon Solutions by the time I hired the attorney. I had already pulled my own credit report and found 2 accounts I didn't recognize. Both opened in the last 14 months, both showing missed payments, both tied to a shipping address I'd never lived at in Clearwater, Florida. I had already requested a copy of my father's probate filing and confirmed that my mother had submitted a competing claim on the life insurance policy 6 days after his death. She had listed herself as an interested party on the grounds that she was owed unpaid child support from a marriage that ended 22 years ago. She was lying. My father paid child support until I was 18. I have the bank statements. I audited them myself. I told my attorney what was happening. He told me what I needed to get. I walked back into the kitchen. I smoothed things over with the disbursement team, I said. But there's a documentation issue. The insurance company needs a signed acknowledgement from all potential claimants before they'll release the funds to a third party. Since my mother filed a competing claim last week, she'll need to formally withdraw it before the transfer can process. My mother's face went through 3 emotions in about 2 seconds. Surprise that I knew about the competing claim. Calculation about whether she could bluff through it. Then a kind of resolute calm that I recognized. It was the look she got right before she said something she couldn't take back. She filed that claim as a precaution, my stepfather said carefully. A precaution against what? I asked. Against you doing exactly this, my mother said. Against you deciding that because your father wrote your name on a piece of paper, you get to walk away with $400,000 while your brother is in danger, and this family has nothing. Your father left me with a child and no support, and I built everything from scratch, and the least you could do, the absolute least, is help when we need you. I let her finish. I have learned, in 11 years of auditing, that people will tell you everything you need to know if you give them enough silence to fill. You built this house, I said slowly, gesturing at the kitchen around us. The renovation, the new addition. My mother lifted her chin. I worked for everything in this house. I nodded. Who took out the second mortgage in my name in March of last year? The kitchen went very quiet. My stepfather set his phone face down on the counter. My mother's hand moved to the transfer form and then stopped. I pulled out my phone and showed her the credit report. 2 accounts. Her address. My name. My social security number on the application. My signature. Or something that looked like it if you didn't know that I signed my name with a lowercase a and whoever forged it used a capital. I'm not going to pretend I stayed calm. My pulse was doing something medical and unpleasant. But I had made a decision about 3 days into this process. I was not going to be the person who cries in this kitchen. I had done that enough. I had cried at 17 when my college savings account turned out to have been emptied to cover Derek's legal fees after his second DUI. I had cried at 23 when I found out the car my mother helped me pick out, the one she co-signed, had been secretly refinanced with her as the primary borrower, and she had missed 4 payments. I had cried every time I discovered a new way my name had been used without my permission, and every time I cried, nothing changed. I was done being a resource. I was here to be a creditor. That, my mother said carefully, is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I said. I want to understand it correctly then. Walk me through it. Maya, my stepfather said. His voice had changed register slightly. Lower, the voice men use when they're deciding whether the conversation is still salvageable. You are sitting on $400,000. Your brother is in genuine danger. Real danger. From real people. And you're standing here playing investigator. Is that who you want to be? I want to be the person who doesn't wire $400,000 to an LLC controlled by your brother in Florida, I said. That's who I want to be. My mother's face hardened. She straightened up and looked at me with an expression I had been seeing my entire life. The one that said I was ungrateful, selfish, and fundamentally failing at the role I had been assigned in this family. You think you're so smart, she said. You always did. You and your spreadsheets and your certifications. But you're still my daughter, and I still know how to make your life very difficult. You want to play hardball? Fine. I go to probate court and I contest that policy. My attorney says we have grounds. Your father missed payments. There are questions about the date the beneficiary designation was last updated. We could tie this up for 2 years. You won't see a dollar. And meanwhile, Derek is not my problem, I said for the second time. But those 2 fraudulent accounts are yours. My stepfather moved toward me. Not aggressively, just close enough to make the room feel smaller. Maya. Be reasonable. We are your family. I looked at him. I had a very specific memory of this man at my high school graduation, sitting in the bleachers on his phone the entire ceremony, and handing me a card afterward with a $20 bill in it. He had signed it from the whole family. Derek was not at graduation. My mother left during the reception to take Derek to urgent care for what turned out to be a hangover. I am being reasonable, I said. I am being the most reasonable person in this room, and I'm going to make you a very reasonable offer. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder my attorney had prepared. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a formal demand letter from my attorney's office, requesting restitution for the 2 fraudulent credit accounts opened in my name, totaling approximately $18,000 in accumulated balances, plus legal fees, plus damages for credit score impact. The second was a notarized statement retracting my mother's competing claim on the life insurance policy, prepared and ready for her signature. "If you sign the retraction and agree to a payment plan for the fraud restitution," I said, "I will not file a police report today." My mother stared at the folder. Her mouth was open slightly. "You're threatening your own mother," she said. "I'm offering you a resolution," I said. "Those are different things." "This is insane," my stepfather said. "You can't come in here and—" "The credit applications have your home address and your email server on the metadata," I said. I didn't look up from the folder. "I work in billing fraud. I know how to trace digital paperwork back to the device it was filed from. Your laptop is registered to this address. I have the IP log." He stopped talking. My mother sat down at the kitchen table. For the first time in the conversation, she looked her age. The performance of certainty she had walked into this kitchen wearing was somewhere on the floor between us. She looked tired and caught, and something I hadn't expected to see, almost relieved, like part of her had known this was coming, and was exhausted from the distance between what she'd done and who she told herself she was. "We were trying to protect him," she said quietly. "I know," I said. "And I understand that. I do. But you protected him with my money, with my credit, with my name, for years. And I am done being the foundation this family stands on while everyone pretends I'm not holding anything up." She looked at the documents. "What happens to Derek?" she asked. "That's between Derek and whoever he owes," I said. "It's not between Derek and me. It never was." She picked up the pen. She signed the retraction. My stepfather signed the restitution agreement after 4 minutes of silence and one very short attempt to renegotiate that I ended by placing my phone on the table with my attorney's number already dialed. I drove home that night with the folder on the passenger seat and my hands completely steady on the wheel. I'd expected to feel something large. Triumph, maybe, or grief, or that particular exhausted release that comes after holding tension for too long. Instead, I felt something quieter, like a room after the furniture has been moved out. Empty, but cleaner than it had been in a long time. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the probate court dismissing my mother's competing claim due to voluntary withdrawal. The life insurance payout cleared 4 days after that. Derek, I found out through a mutual family friend, had received a small cash settlement from selling his car, and my stepfather's brother had apparently negotiated a reduced payoff with the people Derek owed. None of it involved me. None of it involved my name, my credit, my accounts, or my signature on any document I hadn't personally read. I want to tell you something about the fraudulent accounts, because I think it matters. When I first found them on my credit report, I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office building for about 20 minutes and just stared at the concrete wall in front of me. Not because I was surprised. I had suspected something was wrong for years. I had the vague, persistent feeling that somewhere, somehow, my identity was being borrowed without my knowledge, the way you feel a draft before you find the open window. I sat there for 20 minutes because of a memory. I was 14 years old. My mother had just signed me up for a savings account at her bank. She said it was for my future, college money, a safety net. She held my hand while we sat across from the banker, and she told me that this was the most important thing a woman could do. Build her own financial foundation, never depend on anyone. She looked me in the eye and said, "I'm teaching you how to be safe." I believed her for 17 years. The account she opened that day was eventually used as collateral for a personal loan she took out 2 years later. I found that in the records too. I'm not telling you this because I want you to feel sorry for me. I'm past the part where I need that. I'm telling you because I spent a long time believing that what happened to me was complicated, that the love and the theft were somehow intertwined and you couldn't address one without unraveling the other. I believed that holding my mother accountable would mean losing my mother, and I wasn't ready to lose her. What I eventually understood is that I had already lost her. Not in that kitchen. Not when she filed the competing claim. Not even when I found the fraudulent accounts. I lost her long before that, in all the small moments when she chose Derek's comfort over my security, when she looked at what I had built and saw a resource instead of a person, when she said I love you and meant I need you to cooperate. You cannot lose something that was never really yours to begin with. My father knew. I think about that note he tucked inside my birthday card. "This is yours, no matter what anyone tells you." He had been paying child support faithfully for 9 years, watching from a distance as my mother built a life on top of his payments and my quiet compliance. And I think he understood what I was going to need someday. He left me the insurance policy not out of guilt, the way she said, but out of apology, for not getting there sooner, for not pulling me out of a situation he could see from across the distance of a broken marriage. I used part of the insurance money to pay off my student loans. I used another part to set up a real emergency fund, something that exists only in my name, at a bank my mother has never heard of, with an email address she doesn't have access to. I hired a financial advisor. I put the rest in an investment account. I also hired an identity monitoring service and discovered 2 additional inquiries on my credit file that I'm still working through with my attorney. One of them was filed the same week I started my current job, suggesting my mother may have attempted to verify my income at some point. I have turned that information over to the appropriate people. I am no longer managing it emotionally. I am managing it procedurally. That's all I can do. Derek called me once, about 6 weeks after everything settled. He didn't apologize. He said he heard things had gotten weird between me and Mom, and he wanted me to know he never asked her to do any of it. I don't know if that's true. I'm not sure it matters. His debts were his. What she did to cover them was hers. Neither of those things are mine to carry anymore. I told him I hoped he figured things out. I meant it. And then I hung up, and I did not call back. Here is what I know now that I wish I'd understood at 22, at 17, at 14, sitting in that bank with my mother's hand in mine. Financial violence is still violence. When someone opens accounts in your name without your consent, when someone forges your signature, when someone treats your credit history and your financial identity as a shared family resource to be spent at their discretion, that is not a family problem. It is a crime. It is legal harm with legal remedies, and you are allowed to use them. You are not required to absorb it quietly in the name of keeping the peace. The peace was never yours. You were just the one paying for it. The hardest thing I ever did was not confronting my mother in that kitchen. I had been preparing for that conversation for 3 years. The hardest thing was the 6 months before it, when I was still gathering evidence, still running reports, still finding new accounts and new signatures, and still showing up to family dinners and saying, "I'm fine," and passing the bread basket and sitting at that table. You know what I did every single time I sat at that table? I memorized the room. The new tile backsplash they put in the kitchen 2 summers ago. The dining set my mother was so proud of. The addition they built on the back of the house when I was 24. The year I was working double auditing shifts and eating meal prep for every meal to save money. I memorized all of it because I needed to know what I was owed. Not to be petty, to be precise. My mother once told me I was too detail-oriented. She said it like a criticism. She said I needed to learn to let things go, to be more flexible, to understand that family doesn't keep score. She was wrong. Family doesn't keep score. But auditors do. I keep very good score. I don't talk to my mother regularly now. There are people in my life who think that's sad, who say things like, "She's still your mother and you only get one family." And I understand why they say it. They mean well. But they didn't grow up having their social security number memorized by someone who was supposed to be protecting it. They didn't spend 20 years wondering why their credit score was lower than it should have been, before they finally sat down and traced every single anomaly back to the same kitchen, the same address, the same 2 signatures. I grew up being told that love meant sacrifice, that family meant putting others first, that asking for things to be fair was selfish. I absorbed all of that. I built my whole early adulthood around it. I worked harder, earned more, saved more, and handed it over every time someone I loved needed it more than I did, or told me they did, which is not the same thing. I am 31 years old. I have a funded retirement account, a paid-down credit card, and a credit score that is the highest it has been in my adult life because it is finally just mine. I have an apartment that I chose for myself without consulting anyone. I have a savings account that no one else has the routing number to. I am not grateful for what happened to me, but I am clear about who I am because of it. I am the person who reads every document before she signs it. I am the person who traces anomalies back to their source. I am the person who sat in a kitchen with a forged form in front of her and didn't pick up the pen until she knew exactly what she was signing. I built a firewall. I built it around my name, my accounts, my future, my credit, and myself. And I built it out of the same material they spent years trying to take from me. I built it out of what I earned. If you are the person in your family who always covers it, who always figures it out, who always absorbs the shortfall and never says a word, I need you to hear something. That is not love. That is a system. And systems can be exited. They can be audited. They can be dismantled line by line until you find where your name stops and where the damage begins. I cut the wire. Every obligation they tied around me, every account they opened in my name, every signature they borrowed without asking, I found it, and I cut it. Quietly, methodically, permanently. I did not burn the bridge out of anger. I burned it so they couldn't follow me across it, and for the first time in my life, I am standing on solid ground that belongs entirely to me.